Looks like we got a pretty good crowd. I want to encourage everybody to participate. If you have questions as we get into the question and answer session of our service tonight. Philip will be lead us in song. Then we'll have one song, and then we'll have our opening prayer. Dakota Dyer will be leading us there, and then another song, and then Cameron will bring us our lesson. Do want to remind everyone, seniors, if you've not got your pictures to Cameron or video or whatever he may be for next week, please turn those into him, and he will put that all together. Remember, you're going to be coming to the 10 o'clock service. All of our senior graduates will be coming to the 10 o'clock service next week. It will, for those in the AM service, it will be showed on. We'll still show it on YouTube, so you'll be able to see that. But seniors and their families want to encourage them to come to the 10 a.m. service. That's all the announcements I have tonight. So let's join in the singing and let's participate in service tonight. Thank you.
Number 50, 5-0. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear, the hour I first believed. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun.
Would you pray with me? God, thank you for giving us another opportunity to get together and to study your word. Lord, thank you for this new format we have, and thank you for the ability that you've given to Cameron to help us all delve a little deeper into the lessons that we get and to find practical ways to put them to use. Father, I pray that as we go through our study that you would give each of us the courage to speak up and to help one another understand and relate to the things that we learn from your word. Lord, most of all, I pray that what we do here is pleasing to you, and that you do help us to really walk away with a deeper understanding and to take these things out beyond our walls and practice them every day. We ask these things in Christ's name. Amen.
Number 1. There is beyond the azure blue a God concealed from human sight. He tinted skies with heavenly hue and framed the worlds with his great mind. There is a God, he is alive. In him we live and we survive. From dust our God third song will be 496 after the lesson.
Good evening. If you have a Bible with you, we'll be referencing back to Luke chapter 10 quite a bit. So if you want to open back to Luke chapter 10, that will be a perfect place to be. Luke chapter 10. So in terms of short reminder and short refresher from last week, maybe you weren't able to be here the evening of last week, but we're really thankful that you were able to be here this evening. What we've been doing and what we've been working through is bringing back the same concepts and principles from the Sunday morning lesson and kind of just opening them up for a little bit of discussion the following Sunday evening. And so that's kind of what we're going to be looking at, what we're going to be doing this evening again, and looking and thinking about what all we worked through this morning, having just a quick couple-minute refresher. Maybe someone wasn't able to be here this morning, or we could all use just a little bit of a recap, re-sprucing of the text. Is we looked at exactly the last piece in this puzzle of evangelism, being how we're able to make it something that lasts. Making it something that doesn't just come and go in a single series, but something that we can continually look to, somewhere that we can go for continual. I think the word we used was rejuvenation. And so looking at Luke 10 for that, we kind of began by opening them up and thinking about things that last when we take good care of them. And we referenced a few of those, and that'll be something that's a question here in a few moments. We looked at how in taking care of not just physical things, but our own spiritual well-being, our own states of evangelism, our own evangelism, that it can make it where we have a longer tenure in Christ's service by kind of doing some of that personal spiritual maintenance. And so the way that we looked at Luke chapter 10 to kind of guide us to let Christ give the answers of how he wanted his disciples to keep that longevity is it began in verses 1 through 3, where we saw that when he brought all these 72 together, that he didn't just send them out and say, all right, go get them. He paired them off. He put them in pairs. He put them in a state of partnership, because in the gospel model, in the Acts model, in the beginning of the church model, we always look to and we always fall back on evangelism being in partnerships. And then we kind of looked at how the church as a whole can kind of be our team, our partnership that we have not just with one person, but with dozens of different people when it comes to reaching out and connecting with others. And then we carried that through into and remember, we didn't skip over the details, but we put a pin in them and said that there's a different series where we're going to come back to them, because we really wanted to focus on that last note in verse 16 when Jesus was about to send them out. He puts the focus on the sender. So remember, it's not just about us, the ones that are doing the evangelizing. It's not even about them, about the people we're evangelizing to, but always the focus remains on Christ. And that takes a huge pressure off of us, because if it's acceptance, it's not about tooting our own horn. It's about them being able to see Christ. If it's rejection, it's not us taking it personally. It's all about them and us both seeing Christ. And so then we carried through to that last piece. We had our partnerships, we had focusing on the sender, and then we brought everything together with seeing in those last verses 17 through 20, the way that we're truly going to find a long life in God's service, a long life in evangelism, is coming to a point where we rejoice every single time that a sinner repents. Whether it's somebody that we knew super personally, whether it's somebody that we sat down and worked through the gospel with them, studied with them, or someone that we've never met before that somebody else in the church was able to have the blessing to study with, that working through and realizing exactly what's just taken place spiritually does a lot for us in being able to rejoice in that person coming to Christ, coming to the feet of the cross, coming to salvation. And we even went as far as to say Luke 15, in rejoicing in somebody else's salvation, it's one of the closest ways that we can experience heaven, because we know at the end of the prodigal son that every time a sinner repents, that there's rejoicing in heaven among the angels. So as we're going to gateway this a little bit into the discussion part into looking at these discussion questions. I really hope that you were able to gloss through these this morning and during the sermon, maybe glance through them this afternoon in preparation for some of these things. And again, I really appreciated Dakota's prayer. Hope that we can maybe step out on a new limb when it might come to speaking out or saying something or asking something, because if you have a thought or you have a question, it's more than likely you're not the only one. There might be somebody else that has the exact same thought or question that we might be able to benefit them by interacting a little bit when it comes to this text. So, Tony, do we have it on the PowerPoint? Perfect. Looking at question number 1. And this one is kind of our bridge into spiritual discussion. This is the one that's based on the illustration at the beginning, but just a little bit of an icebreaker. What is something that you might have? It might be a possession or something else. It really doesn't matter. What is something that you have taken care of and still have today because you've taken such good care of it? Something that might have some age on it.
I have an iron skillet that Philip bought at an auction before he got married that belonged to his great-grandmother. So it's probably 25, 30 years old.
So that thing has some good age on it. Cast iron skillets last forever, and they taste really good when you take food and put them in them and then put them out of them. Sarah's experimented with that. That's incredible. That's incredible. No doubt. And a rolling pin from a grandfather. What else? Any other things? Some records, some old records. I do too. I have some of my great-grandfathers. We actually listened to one this morning. Do we have another? Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. And we noticed that a lot of these things that we're thinking to, and a lot of these things, then there's probably other people that or you have one in your mind that just hasn't come out yet. But there are things that might have sentiment to us. There are things that might have value to us. And I want to notice that connection for just a minute. That when it comes to something, it either holds some kind of value, right? Because we have of grandparents, of past memories, of doing things together, of seeing, you know what I mean? Or it's something that is of great use or of great function. And so when we're looking and thinking about taking care of and maintaining ourselves spiritually, taking care of and maintaining our evangelistic efforts, our faith, we see that it fits in both of those categories, almost deeming it or making it worthy of our care, making it so much more worthy than even some of the physical things that we sometimes take care of. I know, like, for example, that I have some of the old sentimental things. I also have, like, machinery that is very useful that is older than dirt, but I'm going to keep using it. I'm going to keep changing the oil until it absolutely dies. Why? Because it's of great use to me, right? So in the exact same way, it really reflects and connects to what we've been talking about, that before we talk about how to keep our spiritual state rejuvenated, before we talk about how to keep our evangelistic efforts and our drive to evangelize, keeping it rejuvenated, it kind of lays that groundwork of seeing, it's worth it to do these things. It's worth it to invest in this, and seeing how God can use it over time. Were there any others that others thought of that y'all might have thought of while we were discussing? Yes, Miss Agnes.
I have a bed that my great-grandfather made for his daughter, which was my grandmother.
That's incredible. Great grandfather made for your grandmother. And so we see that there are things of age, and it was something that probably took some effort from someone along the way, not only to recover it, but to keep it as close to its original state as it could. It may be even, we've seen people that might take old cars or old family heirlooms and have even gone as far as to restore them, and that's okay. Sometimes we find either our faith or our drive for evangelism something that maybe is a little bit rusted, maybe is a little bit decrepit, and maybe is something that needs that restoration. And it's something that's worth every minute of it. It's worth every shot of WD-40. It's worth every amount of whatever oil you might be rubbing on the rolling pin or the wooden bed or whatever it is. So I appreciate all your thoughts. I appreciate the contribution, and we kind of see how things of value merit our investing in them. Looking at number 2, starting to kind of make the transition, and this one is a few different parts, but making the transition into spiritual things, making the transition into the text. If you have Luke 10 open in front of you, then you're in the perfect spot. Let's place ourselves in their shoes. We do this sometimes with the junior high and high school class and see what they think. And what I love about these kinds of questions is there's no wrong answers, but it helps us to really sympathize and empathize with them in the moment. Let's place ourselves in their shoes. What thoughts or emotions would be coursing through you if you were present, if you and I were in Luke 10 right now? So we're sitting among the 72. He plucked out however many of us, and we're probably pretty close this evening. Let's say that we were the 72, and Christ has come in, and he's giving us all this instruction, telling us what we're going to be doing, where we're going to be going, how we're going to be evangelizing. So once we've placed ourselves in that spot, what thoughts or emotions would be coursing through you if we were there and Jesus was giving us the limited commission? Involves a little bit of thinking outside the box.
Playing sports growing up, I'd like to think it was that pep talk from that coach, and I'm just busting to get out the gates or ready to go, and I'm hoping that's the way I see. Jesus is right there in front of you, and he's giving you this big spiel, and you're just busting to go. And you feel encouraged to teach, like this vision says.
I love it. That's a good one. Like the coach giving the pep talk and hoping that we would be in that state of excitement. Anybody have any others?
I think I'd have been tired before I even got started.
Oh, I completely understand that. Excited, but at the same time knowing that what we're about to do, it's pretty daunting. It's pretty exasperating. It's going to take 110% of every single one of us to be able to get it done. Any other ideas?
I would say there was fear involved. I can see there being a little fear involved with the subject matter and the newness of it, of Jesus coming out and going out into the world. I would say there was some fear involved.
No doubt. And I think that it's funny how those things kind of go together sometimes. A lot of times, if it's something that is new, the way it would have been new to them, and if we were there, the way it would have been new to us, there's that excitement factor, but there's also a lot of fear that goes into it at the exact same time, because we want to see how it goes. We want it to go well, but at the same time, it's kind of like stepping out into the unknown. It's kind of like being the first one to take that step on the moon. Like exactly, we know we've been told, but you can only prep to a certain point, and you can only be certain to a certain point. And so that's why I wrote down that I would be thinking, how are people going to respond to this? What would be going through my mind is okay, like you're Jesus, you're the Son of God. I'm here for a purpose and I'm here for a reason. I know that you are too. But us going out and doing this, what are people going to think? What are people going to say? And another thing I wrote down is, will this really work? Will this really work? A ragtag group of different people from different backgrounds that most likely from every record of history that we have are not super noble, not ones that are in the upper echelon, like they weren't in the aristocratic kind of level. They were common men or below. So what am I going to say or do to get people's attention? And notice that's how Jesus responds. He says it's not about you having to worry about getting other people's attention, Cameron. It's about the message that you're bearing. I'll do the attention getting. But any other thoughts that might be running through y'all's minds if we're sitting here and we're faced with this? Yes.
Well, it said, I can't imagine going out and not have no money, no nothing, just going out. It said no shoes,
Yes, ma'am.
and
You're exactly right, Miss Sewell. And I think that this is, I'm so excited for the Cost of Discipleship series, is that what Jesus does is in this moment, he completely and totally imposes their trust in him. They have to have complete and total dependency in him in order for this to work, in order for this to happen, and in order to follow his will and his instruction. And so what this could have partially been, I'll save that for a later question. That's like number 4 or 5. But I loved your comment. I loved that one a lot. Looking at number A, in life, how big of a difference does good partnership make compared to maybe bad partnership? In y'all's experience, maybe it's with work, maybe it's with relationships, I don't know what it might be, but what difference does good partnership versus bad partnership make in life? What have y'all ran into and encountered?
A lot of times if you have a bad partnership, you focus more on the bad partnership than you are what your goal really is, like what you're joined together to do. You're focused more on how you relate to that person in that way rather than what you're supposed to be doing.
Completely agree. If we don't have a good partner, if we have a partner that's lacking, we might even be spending more time focusing on what they're not doing, or focusing on the areas where they're lacking or where we have to pick up the slack, than focusing on the mission itself or the goal itself. That's a great one. Any other ideas?
Well, if you have a good partnership, you're going to have confidence in your partner. If you don't have any confidence in your partner, I feel like it'd be a bad partnership and things just won't work.
I completely agree.
Going back a little bit before here, I feel like Jesus was the perfect instructor. And sure, he had a way of calming the minds and the feelings of these people. And I think as Christians, in trying to convince people to become Christians, we need to follow that same example.
Mm.
We need to start out and build upon get the individual's confidence built up, and that way show them and tell them that becoming a Christian is hard, but we can do it.
I completely agree.
Like Barry said, he was the perfect coach.
He was. And part of the way that Jesus incorporated that, kind of like what Mr. Bobby was saying, is that in calming easing them, calming their fears, calming their anxieties, part of the way that Jesus did it was by not only showing them what good partnership looks like, but also assigning them to be those good partners for each other. And if we have confidence in whoever it is that we're working with, it even further, and notice the progression of how Jesus goes about this is the further they get into evangelism, the further they step into evangelism, they're no longer on the outside looking in, but they're taking it on for themselves. As they step deeper and deeper and deeper into it, you see Jesus going to great lengths to lift the burden more and more off of them and place it more and more on himself, place it more and more on brothers and sisters, make it something that is shared and isn't so daunting, even though it can be daunting sometimes. And so I love the aspects of having a good partner and how that can make a difference. Any other thoughts when it comes to this?
I feel like it's kind of like being assigned a partner in school. You either get one that you can work really well with, or you get one that doesn't do the job at all, and you're focused on doing it all on your own.
And when we think about, and I know whether it's been 5 minutes or 5 decades since we've been in school, that you can probably think back and remember to some time that there was an assignment where you either were assigned a bad partner, or maybe you weren't there that day when everybody else chose partners and you were left with the last person that no one wanted to be partners with. And as you had to work through whatever it wasn't something that gave you confidence. On the flip side, it was something where we felt like, man, I'm having to pull more of the weight here. And so that's a big part of the reason why Jesus was exemplifying what it meant, not just for them to find that good partner in evangelism, but them to work towards being that good partner when it comes to the message that they're carrying, their interaction with people, the way that they were able to focus on him amid everything else that's going on around them. So one thing that I wrote down that I thought of is that it makes me think of my dad, because he works in a plant. If you don't know, they make sheets of Alucobond. Have you ever seen the Epcot Center? It's sided in Alucobond. That's what they make. So anyway, they work on the line in making these sheets of this exterior siding, and they have partners, and so they'll rotate on and off on the line each hour which partner is on and which partner is off. And so one thing that he always said growing up, and one thing that he always fell back on, is that his partner Tommy, they've been working together for 18 years now, because it was 16 or 17 years a couple of years ago. So just this incredible time, longer than some people in here have been alive, like, you know what I mean? And he said that that's one of the great things, that other people that work with him don't have the same assurance that he has when he walks into work, because he knows that who he's working with knows what he's doing. And even so much so that they've been doing it so long in this essence of good partnership that they know each other, they know what each other are good at. He said it would take, not gloating or anything, but sometimes if something breaks down, they have to break down the line. He said they always want the line to break down when me and Tommy are on, just because we can get the whole thing broken down in an hour and a half or 2 hours, where somebody else it might take a whole shift or whatever it is. And so when we think about good partnership, it's something that goes to show it's something that can be developed over time, something that grows over time, and maybe something that at first it might be a little bit rocky, something we have to work on, just like any other relationship, is our partnerships with each other in spreading Christ's gospel, his message. So that part number B, how does our world view partnership, and how does Jesus view it? Thinking about not just the way that we might think about partnership, but what might the world think about it that maybe even stands contrary to what Christ is trying to teach here. How does the world view partnership versus how does Jesus view partnership?
I think the world views it as very temporary, like very easily disbanded. Just give up on it.
Mm-hmm.
You take marriage for example, but there's a lot of marriages in the world that go into it, and it's a partnership. They go into it thinking, hey, I'll give it a couple of years. If it don't work out, we'll just get a divorce and be done. And that's how a lot of not only marriages but partnerships in business. That's how they look at it. Well, it's temporary. It's throwaway.
Yeah, 2 words: prenuptial agreement. That it's not even going into it with the thought or concept of it being something that lasts, but something that's just fleeting. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, no skin off my nose, it'll be all right. Any other thoughts or ideas? Maybe how the world might view partnership versus how Jesus might view partnership. A lack of commitment between people, and I think that traces back and roots to a lot of the problems. And there might be different reasons for that. We won't get into all but different reasons of maybe being hurt in the past, or maybe some this or that or the other, which are all very real and all deserve their own merit in their own situation and context. But at the same time, it has created an entire society that we're surrounded by, an entire culture that isn't very keen on the idea of investing in that relationship and committing to a relationship, even on a spiritual level like this, even committing to one another in a way where, I don't know, you and I might study together a little bit before we go and study with somebody else, something like that. We're just not so sure about that much investment, about that much commitment, and that's a very real example of a worldview of partnership, or a worldview of commitment seeping into the church and affecting the way that the church looks, affecting the way that our partnerships with each other look. So that's very, very real. The world seeing it as short-term and easily breakable. Any other thoughts when it comes to that? I don't want to overlook anyone. Yes?
I feel like the world could definitely view it as like a me thing. Like, I'm going to join this partnership to help me, whereas Jesus might view it more as like, we're going to join this partnership to help you and to make sure that we're doing the best for Jesus instead of the me mentality.
You're exactly right. I think that's something that even inadvertently. Sometimes we might even teach our young ones, might even teach our children, might even teach people, is that, all right, going into this situation, the first thing that should run through my mind is, what's in it for me? The first thing that should run through my mind and what I should be working through is, how does this impact my life? How does this impact my situation? How might it benefit it? How might it hurt it? And that be kind of what drives and what dictates. And again, if that seeps over into the church, if that seeps over into our evangelistic partnerships or our mentality as a church, it can very negatively affect everything that Jesus stood for and everything that Jesus was trying to do here in Luke chapter 10, specifically verses 1 through 3, is that he was trying to create bonds not that are self-centered, but that are looking to him, that are looking to others, that are saying it's not about how can this benefit me, but instead, what is our potential together for Christ? What is our potential together for something greater than ourselves? And having more of that outward focus instead of inward focus. So I completely agree. That was great. Any other thoughts?
Evangelism partner. You commented that the normal thought would probably be to think about the best teacher, the best preacher, the best whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of made me think that. I think we do that with a lot of relationships in life. But two good partners doesn't always mean that you have a good partnership.
Mm.
So I think it's more about how you complement one another as opposed to just finding the best person at whatever.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. And if you weren't able to hear, we talked about this morning when we had the pick your evangelism partner on 3, and we thought about who that would be. Who would be the person that I go to? That we would often might gravitate towards that outgoing personality, or that Bible class teacher, or the preacher, the elder, whoever it is. But a lot of times that it was in Scripture, a lot of times that it wasn't about finding the two greatest evangelists and sticking them together, but finding the two people that mesh the best. And a lot of times, especially thinking to Acts, a lot of times Paul's partnerships were him taking somebody under his wing. Because notice that whether it be Paul and Barnabas's entire demeanor was characterized as what? The man of encouragement, the encourager, the supporter, the sidekick. So much so that when they were in Lystra in Acts chapter 14, that they thought that Paul was Zeus, a greater god, and then Barnabas was Hermes, a lesser god in Greek terms. So people saw it and people noticed it, that they had a partnership that complemented each other more so than just trying to find the best person for me. And it was two people that could grow together, that could push each other, that could complement one another. So I thought that was incredible. Any more thoughts? Last call. Sounds good. Looking to number 3. And this one is incredibly broad, so we'll see where it goes. We talked this morning about one of the greatest ways that we can keep our longevity in ministry, in our own ministries, is by focusing on Jesus. And we talked in Luke chapter 10, the sender. He is the sender, focusing on him. So what are some things that can often take our focus off of Jesus without us even knowing it or without us even recognizing it? Different life things mainly come to mind for me. I think when there is a lot going on, or maybe a lot of transition, or maybe when you have just bought a house. That is hypothetically. If you don't know yet, me and Sarah bought a house a few weeks ago. And when something like that happens, it can be complete and totally consuming. And I remember the next morning we were standing in the back and somebody asked, well, did you get any sleep last night? And I said, I went to sleep all right, but for 15 days now, every morning I've woken up an hour early thinking about something to do with that. So it's something that, and remember, inherently not a bad thing, inherently a very good thing. In and of itself, not a problem, but when it becomes so self and total consuming, it's something that different things in life without us even knowing it, without us even thinking about it, can completely and totally take our focus off of the sender and put it on to something else. What are some other things that y'all might experience or think of, or see in friends or see in family? Sickness.
Sickness and death.
Do you mind elaborating in what ways that might?
You know, when someone's sick and you're totally focused on that person, and sometimes you lose your focus because you're so focused there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to explain
Oh
it.
no, and it can be in both instances when we think about sickness. When it comes to personal sickness, we deal a lot when it comes to individuals that are going through sickness, and there's entire sects of grief counseling for people that haven't even really lost anyone yet, but they've lost part of themselves in that sickness. They've lost my normal. I've lost being able to do, and that's a process that some people have to work through when it's them specifically going through sickness. On the flip side, there is an outside factor of a lot of us that maybe at times have cared for people that have been in sickness, have cared for people that have been caught up in some sort of illness, and when it comes to caring for others, which obviously, again, in and of itself, a wonderful and a Christ-like thing, and actually, so much so, it's a direct command when we read through the epistles, is for the church to care for our own sick, to care for our own widows, to care for our own people, as well as others. But when it can easily, without us even noticing, become something that steps outside of that into something that totally encompasses. It takes us away from our focus on Christ, and may even just kind of deprive us a little bit spiritually, like going without a little bit of nourishment. So I completely see and understand that. Any other thoughts?
I think you're seeing it every night. If you watch the local news, you're seeing people are getting so encompassed on social issues.
Mm-hmm.
They're forgetting totally about God and Jesus and eternal life is their goal. They're so worried about the social issues that are going around that they're, you know, the true peacemaker is Jesus. He can make peace for everybody. Everybody would just focus on him.
I completely agree. And we see a lot of times also we can become really engulfed in those things, even if we don't consider ourselves to be a part of them. That we will let them take a bigger toll, maybe on our demeanor, or on how we feel for that day, or how we interact with other people for that day, just based on the negative that we've seen on the news. That we might let the news have a greater impact on me as a person, me spiritually, than Christ did for that day and how I interact with other people. And I've been guilty of that as much as anybody. Any other thoughts?
I think like our ego, we let our ego get in the way sometimes. It's not, just like what we read, you know, it becomes not about Jesus. It becomes, oh, I've got, you know, I'm converted 15, I'm converted 17. You know, it becomes a, you know, almost a competition for ourselves instead of, this is about, not about what I'm doing, it's about what we're doing, what Jesus did. So it's not, our ego gets in the way sometimes.
Exactly right. That a lot of times when it comes to our evangelism, we can become our own greatest enemy at times. That we can get in the way as far as making the focus about me, or making the focus about numbers, or making me think, well, I've done this, I've got this person, or I studied with this person, or I talked to this person, and kind of connecting directly back to what Lydia said, that internal thinking. Having an outward outlook instead of that inward in look of it all being about us, or all centering on us, because that's very real, and we run into that roadblock quite a bit when we live in a world that has groomed us to think that way, has groomed us to act that way. So with all of these in mind, and maybe even some others in mind that you've thought of that you didn't give out loud, and that's perfectly okay, let's look to look to letter A. Any ideas on how someone that is struggling with their focus on the sender, how they might restore their focus to the sender? Somebody that might be struggling with this, might be dealing with, we gave a list of different things that might impact our focus on Christ. how might someone restore that? What advice or ideas might we give from Scripture or life experience or elsewhere?
But pray.
Prayer is huge. Prayer is huge. Prayer is probably, in one man's opinion, one of the most underrated disciplines in the entirety of the church. It's something that we do, and not necessarily a lifestyle that we live and a way that we think. There is a book that is on my reading list that is called the something, some big froofy name like the Church Disciplines of Antiquity, but it says that's not what matters. The part that it does is it says prayer like a daily walk, or prayer like a daily conversation. And haven't read it yet, but based on the title, it just made me think for a moment of exactly in the New Testament how they took prayer and how they thought about prayer and how they looked at it. And that one of the greatest ways that we can restore our focus on God is simply by talking to Him. Is simply there is nothing wrong in saying God, in prayer, saying, God, I need you this week. I need you just as much as I've needed you every week. But this week specifically, I really need you to help keep my focus on you. Help me in doing that. Give me some reminders in doing that. So I completely agree, Mr. Hansel. That was great.
Pray. Sit there and talk to Jesus. We should act like we're talking to him face to face. Even though he's up in heaven.
You're exactly right.
That's what I taught my husband.
And that's something that can completely and totally transform the way that we see God, transform the way that we talk to God, transform just our faith as a whole, is thinking about, and it's not just about praying, but also keeping in mind how we're praying, how we're interacting, and how we're going to God, how we're talking to God, because that's going to play a direct impact on what action we take once we leave that prayer. And so I love that. I completely agree with it. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
You can set goals for yourself. Like I have 6 kids, and sometimes that can be a little overwhelming. So
I don't believe
I
you.
set like
I'm just kidding.
one little goal for myself, and then like today I'm going to sit down and I'm going to read my Bible for 5 minutes, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. And each goal that you meet, you're getting one step closer to your ultimate goal.
I completely agree with that. Goal setting can be huge, and it's something that at first it might even feel a little bit like a checklist. But what I love about goal setting is when I can look back and see, because there are times when we'll be going through, and I might even be putting in effort towards my faith, working towards my faith, and then I just have a moment where I get down about it, where I get down and think, man, I'm not. It's really not working. Me and God aren't as close as we once was. But if we can go back and see, okay, here is everything I have done for my relationship with God in the past week. Here's everything I have accomplished in the past couple weeks that maybe I've even forgotten about since then. Some of that goal setting can be great for us to fall back on. Great for us to go back to and see where that development has taken place, and will definitely keep us when we're talking about a long life and a long tenure in His service. That's a great point, a great thing to implement.
Wrestling through whatever you're working on, whatever you're doing it as if you're doing it for the Lord and not for man.
Mm.
I can't exactly where it's at, but I agree with that.
That's huge. That's huge. Yes. Whatever you do in word or deed, do all in the name of the Lord. And when we do that, I know that I've ran into different. There's one of my greatest mentors had this hiccup in his faith. Is he said, I started this ministry and it was going very well, and I mean like. He was a minister at a church, but started like a specific, we might call it like a program or whatever it was. And he really poured into it, and he really invested in it, and it was going really well. And he just broke down. He broke down in the pulpit, one of just the most transparent people I've ever met. And he said, I realized one day that I was doing this ministry, and I was helping all these people, and I was getting all these pats on my back. And then he just cracked like an egg, and he started tearing up, and he said, and the whole time I was doing it for myself. And so I think one of the great things that we can do in restoring our focus is when we're in the moment, maybe when we're studying or when we're praying or when we're reaching out and talking with somebody, to just take 5 seconds and ask ourselves, who is this for? Ask ourselves, is this an offering or a sacrifice that I'm devoting to God, or is this something that I know I should do that's going to make me feel real good? And because we can all fall into it, and it might not even hurt beforehand for us to have that short, quick little prayer of, God, whatever this is that I'm about to do, please help me to do it for you. Please help to remind me, keep me in check of who this is really for. So that's a great one. That's a great reminder. Looking through one that struck me really quickly is in the book of Deuteronomy, when we read through the children of Israel just about to take the land of Canaan. And right before they go in, God writes them through Moses this entire big long book of a reminder of all the laws that they have before they go in. But one thing that he continually comes back to is he sets reminders for them. Whether it be a feast or a festival, whether it be a certain place that is a pile of rocks or a city that they're about to burn, whatever it was, there are things that were supposed to stand and stay and remain as a trigger or as a reminder of who he is and what he did and what he will continue to do for them if they just obey him and if they just follow him. And so something for me that I've really grown in reading through it slowly but surely is that God has designed, he knows we're physical people, whether it be the Lord's Supper or whether it be something that we establish ourselves. One thing that can be a huge help is implementing different reminders or triggers of, when I see this tree at this spot at my house, I remember this one time, and that was God. And whatever, it could be something as simple as that, or it could be something much grander. But anyway, before we move on to number 4, are there any more thoughts? Perfect. What is something that we might look forward to in life? And this could be a moment, this could be a milestone, etc. What is something that we have looked forward to in life, that you may have looked forward to, and it could have been forever ago, but you remember looking forward to it? It might be something that you're looking forward to right now. It really doesn't matter. What are some things? Being able to drive. I can relate with that. We got my first truck probably 7 months before I could actually get my license, and I can't tell you how many nights I spent just sitting in the driver's seat looking like a crazy person sitting in the driveway listening to the radio holding the steering wheel. I completely agree. Other milestones. Jacob Doss, other milestones. Getting married. She answered it correctly. That's a big one that we look forward to. A big thing that we make a ton of plans, go put a ton of effort and work in on, get everything ironed out exactly perfectly. That's a huge life change. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
It goes along with that one, walking a daughter down the aisle.
Oof. Walking a daughter down the aisle. Year to go. Year to go. Oh. Any other ones?
For a lot of people, it's having a family. But I know for me, I have a big family, so I've always looked forward to having a family of mine.
Looking forward to having a family of our own, maybe even coming from a big family, and can't wait to have that for ourselves and be like, this is mine. These are my people. This is it. That's huge. I completely agree.
The first child.
First child.
The first child.
I can't imagine everything that could go along with that. We call Everett our child, but we know it's not the same. Everett's our dog. Sorry.
For the class of 2020.
Graduation. That's a huge one, especially for everything that we've been through in the past few months with some of our young people, whether it be college or whether it be high school, whatever it is. That's something that we look forward to. And I can't imagine what this past weekend was like, to feel like this is a huge milestone, and then they said, yeah, sorry, it's not anymore, we're taking it away. But then it kind of came back again, and everything that went along with that. There are big milestones that we often look forward to. Any others? Any other ideas?
Baptism of your children.
Baptism of
Or
children.
any family member that's not.
Yeah, people that we're so close to. And did you have something else or what? Okay. People that we're so close to. I hate it when I accidentally cut people off, so I try not to. That it's something that we, as parents or as close family members or whoever it is, it's something that we might even become anxious about a little bit. Like, okay, what's the timeline? How's it going to break down? What's going to happen? I know we've talked about it some. I know that it almost, maybe even almost happened or at church camp or this or that. You know what I mean? And we look forward to it. We long for it. And that's a great thing. It shows it is a true mark of a spiritually focused parent, without a doubt. So with all these milestones in mind, and I'm sure there are a bunch of other ones that we could also name and think of, we think about how we look forward to those things. How it might be weeks, months, years that we long for those things, look forward to those things. Now let's take that thought with us into part A. When we rejoice over a sinner who repents, we follow the examples of the angels in heaven, Luke 15:10. So to you, thinking about us looking forward to heaven, how does rejoicing over someone who has been saved, has put Christ on in baptism, to you, how does rejoicing help put our focus on heaven and eternity? To you, how does that rejoicing, that last part of the puzzle that we talked about, how does that help take our focus and place it on the eternal, place it on the long term? It makes us where we look forward to where we're going to go, where we're going to be. Because when someone makes that decision, when we see and witness that happening, we realize that it's something so much greater than just what we see. There's so much going on spiritually, like what we saw happen in Acts 2, where that person has started a completely different journey. That person, 1 Peter 5, has opened up an entirely new hope that is for them on the other side of life. And it kind of makes us think a little bit. That's the reason why I've seen a lot of times when it comes to working with young people or youth groups, that when you might have a single baptism, a lot of times it'll start a chain reaction, because you're taking and you're placing focus and making people think in a way maybe they've never thought before about, why are they doing that? What is on the other side of life? Am I prepared for that? You know what I mean? And so we've probably even seen that happen before in our own lives. Any other ideas of how rejoicing can help put our focus on heaven and eternity?
Cameron, you said the key word,
Hope. I completely agree. I think that's one of the greatest driving factors that we have in our own relationship with God is hope. Is hope for what is to come. And looking at Matthew 6, it shows us what we're investing in the spiritual over the physical, and so that's huge. That plays a big factor. Looking down to number 5, I was gonna get a volunteer earlier, but if I could get a volunteer, yeah, thank you, Rusty. Could you please read Matthew 28 verses 16 through 20? Matthew 28 verses 16 through 20.
The Bible says, then the 11 disciples went away to Galilee, to the mountain which Jesus had appointed for them. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you, and lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age.
Thank you so much. When we think about the Great Commission, because that's the one, that's the one that we give the emphasis to. That is that big pivotal moment where Jesus has given us the gospel and told us all to go. Maybe let's make some connections for just a minute, because if Luke 10/Matthew chapter 10, same account that we read this morning, if that is the limited commission, so this is the Great Commission, any thoughts or connections that might come to mind when we put these two side by side? One of the great ones that I see is he talks about authority. he says in both accounts, he says that all authority under heaven and under earth have been given to me. And he goes as far into to Luke 10 as to say, and I'm transferring that authority to y'all as far as the way that you can heal the sick or handle snakes or scorpions or do all these things. Any other thoughts when we think about seeing these side by side? Anything that might come to mind?
Tells us to go, not sit.
It tells us to go instead of sit, and it places us in that spot of action. I completely agree, which hits on what we talked about last week in James. What else?
I think about how much bigger our opportunity is
Mm.
than theirs. I mean, they obviously had a hard time constraint. You're talking about coming back to Jesus, and so their mission was over, and ours is a lot longer than that.
That's very true. That's very true. And I don't know, I'll be honest, I don't know if it makes it harder or easier, but they were being sent out into new territory. They were being sent out into cities that they probably didn't know all that well, whereas our cities are very close to us, our cities are very close to home. And so I'm not sure, that might be a person-to-person thing. It might be easier one way or easier the other, I don't know, but it is something that makes it very different for sure. And in a lot of ways, our mission has been given in that Great Commission. It's that long term, whereas the limited commission was just a foretaste of it. And what we held on to about 30 minutes ago that I'm now going to plug back in and say is what I love about Luke 10 that shines light on Matthew 28 is that when they came back from the limited commission, when they came back, and remember that rejoicing part that we read in Luke 10, 17 through 20, I'm pretty sure, was that Christ, everything that you said was going to happen, happened. All of these people listened to your message. All of these people were changed by what you were able to do. And so I can't help but think that verse 17 through 20 moment had to be going through their minds when Christ said what he said in Matthew 28. The fact that if I will go the way that Jesus has told me to go, great things are going to happen, and he's going to be the one to make those happen. I can't help but think that that's what was running through their minds, because he had already proved himself to them once, and he was ready to do it again. Anything else? Flipping to the last couple, looking at 6 and 7, and I thought this might happen time-wise, so I put them on the same slide. We'll ask this question as one question. Whether it be any other thoughts about natural evangelism and about evangelism, because remember, this is the end of the series, so speak now or forever hold your peace. But also, when it comes to just personal life, what might help us keep on keeping on in our faith? Is there anything that comes to mind or anything that you would like to share? Reading God's Word. That can have a big impact in our spiritual life and in our longevity for Him. I completely agree, Mr. Ansel.
Knowing God in heaven is real.
Knowing that God in heaven is real. And it not just being something that we come to church and we talk about, but something that we've gone and we've dug in and we've discovered for ourselves, and we see and we know for ourselves, having assurance in what lies on the other side of life. I completely agree.
Knowing that everything has a purpose and every opportunity that we're given, whether it go good or bad, is for a purpose. God has it.
And that's one of the greatest things for me that has eased worries and eased cares and eased anxieties through life, is knowing whatever's going to end up happening, God has found a way to shine through it. And there have been things that I've even talked about with brothers and sisters here that have gone about and have happened, and we've thought, what in the world? Like, what is this? Why is this happening? Look back 3 months later, oh, okay, God, we get it now. Okay, God, we see what you were doing there. We see how, even if it wasn't your doing, God, we see how you've worked through this. And that's something incredible to be able to fall back on. That helps me keep on keeping on for sure. Any others? I heard focusing on the positives and
Support from your brothers and sisters in Christ keeps me keeping on.
support from brothers and sisters in Christ. And I think that when we look at Scripture, we see a slew of very positive people. And they're positive not just as a character trait or a character quality, but they're positive out of the essence of being like Jesus. Knowing that He is the one that can turn some of those things around and make something out of them has a big impact. And then also knowing the exact value of what we have right here and what we have in this church, in this kingdom, in this gift that God has given, when it comes to being able to lean on each other, when it comes to being able to encourage each other. You and I have no idea one small encouragement that we might give to someone that we had no idea needed it so badly, but we gave it, and it changed everything for their day, changed everything for their week, their month, changed everything for the struggle that they were just going through. We have no idea the impact that we can make by those little things. So any other thoughts? Perfect. I thank you so much for the way that y'all interacted with the text and with each other and with these questions, and I'm looking forward to do it again this week. We will say one quick prayer on behalf of our application of this for this week, and then we will close out. Again, we always want to remind you, the invitation is extended. The invitation isn't a song, it isn't a single moment, but it is an ongoing offer of extended and open arms of Jesus. And it's something that we don't do, but that we just facilitate it. And so if you have something that you might need prayers for, I encourage you, please reach out to somebody. Reach out to an elder, reach out to me, reach out to someone that you're close to. And I said it last week, but I'll say it again. James 5:16 doesn't say confess your faults to an elder by walking down the aisle and during the invitation song. It just says confess to one another. Confess things, let's work through things, pray through things with one another. Because if we talk about leaning on people, that's one of the greatest ways we can do it. So if you have any need, make sure that that's known this evening. Let's not go home with heavy hearts. But let's say a quick prayer for application, and then we'll sing our dismissal song. Let's talk to God. Lord, we thank you for your word, and we thank you for Luke 10, and we thank you for the way that it shows us how we can have a long life in evangelism for you. God, we pray that these things become not concepts that are talked about, but life moments and opportunities that you open doors for us and that we create with others to bring people to you. Please be with us and give us strength and courage. Help us to apply and help us to be more like you and closer to you. And in your Son's holy name, amen.
Please stand. If you haven't had the opportunity to take the Lord's Supper, just go see Mr. Paul and he will direct you to the place. 496. This world is not my home, I'm just a passing through. My treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Just up in glory land we'll live eternally. The saints on every hand are shouting victory. Their song of sweetest praise drift back from heaven's shore, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore.
Are there any other announcements we need to make before we close the prayer? Okay, let's go. Most gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you once again for another opportunity to be here this evening to study another portion of your word. Father, thank you for the opportunity to study your word, Father, and help us to go out this week, Father, and be encouragers and be the Christian example we need to be toward other people. Father, continue with